Good evening. I originally wanted to do this in a live stream. However, I got new Wi Fi. I haven't figured out the right settings to stream with yet. So, aside from plugging up with the cord, and I really don't feel like going downstairs to stream in the living room. So, instead, I will do this as a pre recorded video. This is the misspelled Maij, the first episode. This is more meant to be a blogging type of thing in which I give more opinionated things rather than talking about tips, tricks, mechanics, creative process, this, that, and everything else, blah, blah, blah. So, pardon me. Misspelled Maij, where's that name come from? That was my first homebrewed tavern. It's appeared in every homebrewed game. Once I get into more homebrewed territory, no matter the rule set, no matter the setting, no matter the campaign. It's kind of a play on words, as you can probably tell from the spelling. Um, Much like Dave Arness's the comeback in. So, the first opinion piece I've got that's purely opinion, my own. You may or may not disagree with it or agree with it. We'll find out. I think most people that view my channel will. So let's talk about it. The My first opinion being about old school games being preferable. Modern editions very, I know, cutting edge kind of territory, right? So, in the ever evolving world of role playing games, the allure of old school editions continues to captivate enthusiasts despite the flashy innovations and codifications of modern editions. New systems boast streamlined mechanics, supposedly streamlined, but they end up being more codified and clunky and chunky than anything. And maybe some more updated things. We've noticed the lack of inspiration of the adventures, and more towards keeping people at a college, at a festival. A lack of adventure, really. Many players still find themselves drawn to the gritty charm and distinctive appeal of classic games. Here's why old school RPGs, in my opinion, stand out as preferable to modern counterparts. I want to get the base surface level thing out of the way, and that was the nostalgic value. There's something uniquely nostalgic about old school RPGs. For many, these games represent a simpler time when tabletop gaming was more about creativity and camaraderie than polished or lack thereof production values. Quality assurance has really fallen down the drain on a lot of these books. I have a bunch of 5e books to prove it. The feel of classic rule books, I mean, just simply look at the classic BX booklets with the drilled holes for your binders, and the retro art, the classic art inside, evokes a sense of nostalgia that enhances the gaming experience for a lot of people because of the atmosphere. For veteran players and newcomers alike, diving into these classic games offers a window into the origins of the hobby, the infancy, if you will, of it all. Second, in my opinion, only to the nostalgic value, is the community and tradition involved. The old school RPG community is rich with tradition and shared experiences. People talk about their games, their sessions from 50 years ago. Many players enjoy this sense of continuity because even if you can't get a hold of these older editions, you could still get some retro clones that are pretty close, pretty darn close to the original. And connection that comes from participating in a hobby that has been cherished for decades, in some cases, maybe even a century. Engaging with classic games often means joining a community that values history and even the evolution of some of their games. After all, when was the last time you didn't homebrew something? A spell, a class, but it offers to some people looking for community a sense of belonging and, obviously a shared enthusiasm about the subject. Now that I've gotten the more, in my opinion, based things out of the way of my little list that I compiled here, that I wrote up, let's start off with what I think is actually one of the biggest strengths, and that's the simplicity and speed. The old school rule systems are renowned for their simplicity. The original Dungeons and Dragons and the basic and expert set of the game embraced a straightforward set of mechanics that allowed for quick learning and fast gameplay. After all, when you put ages 10 and up on the cover, it's logically assumed that a child can pick it up and play it, and that's the way a game should be. Unlike modern games with extensive rules and complex systems, these games let players dive straight into the action. 3d6 down the line for your attributes, 3d6 times 10 for gold, buy your equipment. If you're a first level magic user, get your first spell. Some systems, the cleric even gets a spell at first level. Uh, get your attack bonuses in order, and there you go. You're ready to play. It takes less than 5 minutes. The simplicity fosters creativity as players focus on emergent storytelling and improvisation rather than getting bogged down by intricate rules. After all, there's no quicker way to destroy a story than by saying you can't do that. That's not in the rules. Simply read Matt Finch's Old School Primer and you'll get what I'm talking about with that reference. Emphasis on imagination. Old school RPGs focus less on detailed character customization and more on the imagination and narrative. Players are encouraged to think outside the box and craft unique solutions to situations and problems. The minimalistic approach to the rules allows for greater flexibility, making the game more about the adventure and less about adhering to specific mechanics. This emphasis on imagination can lead to more memorable and dynamic gaming experiences and narratives. I would I would propose to you that if you were into the story gaming aspect of this hobby, old school rule sets are more geared towards that because of the emergent storytelling that happens at the table from this simpler style of play. You'll often hear people talk about rulings over rules, and this is what we're talking about. Because there's no concrete rule, the game master can make up a rule on the fly. And some of my more memorable and fun experiences that come about from things like, are we allowed to do that? You could certainly try, and then making a ruling on it in the moment and having an outcome that I never thought would happen and wouldn't have been possible if there was a hardcore codified rule set for it. This is also, in my opinion, one of the biggest strengths, and that is that they have less dependency upon supplements. These older rule sets were often designed to be played with minimal additional material. The core rule book or rule books, depending on which iteration of the classic role playing games you're playing, were generally all that was needed to enjoy a game. In contrast, modern editions frequently rely on an array of supplements, expansions, and additional rule books to fully experience a game. This, pardon me, this can sometimes lead to a feeling of needing to keep up with an ever growing list of resources. Classic games with their more self contained rule systems eliminate this concern altogether. After all, you don't need a supplement to add a druid. You don't need another supplement to add a half orc or something like that. You can simply take the bestiary or you could take the cleric and you could probably come up with a few spells or like simply reverse a few spells or redo certain spells that already exist but make it to a more baseline level. There you go. The thief class was an example of a homebrewed class making its way into official material. After all, it didn't exist in the first edition, in original edition of Dungeons and Dragons until Supplement 1, right? Greyhawk. But it was birthed in the magazines because people were homebrewing this thing and putting it into the game. So it made its way into the game. And without that, you wouldn't have rogues today. for some of you more modern players. All right, so let me look more on my list here. I think I might have covered everything I wanted to talk about. Yep. So I really wanted to put forward this idea that you do not need all this codified nonsense. That you don't need all this strict rules, lawyering style in at your table. You don't need it. The less rules you have, the better. That being said, really where the strength of these games come from is because of this simplicity of the rules that do exist. After all, the rules only exist really to maintain a consistency and a verisimilitude to the world you're making at the table. And again, whether you are somebody that loves a good old fashioned sandbox like me, or you're somebody more geared towards the Hickman model, because there's a time and a place for the Hickman model. After all, people still revere Ravenloft, right? Ravenloft wouldn't have been the juggernaut had it been created in 5e. I'm a firm believer in that. If there was all these feats and skills and stuff like that, don't get me wrong. Yeah, there was some things in first edition AD&D that you could say resembled kind of what we would see, but nothing on the level of what 5e has or third edition. Ugh. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I don't really like third edition at all. So, uh, but there's my opinion. You can take it and leave it. It's up to you. But I'm a firm believer that if you're somebody that's into, whether you're into the more story driven thing or the sandboxy thing, the OSR is probably going to be for you. It certainly serves more memorable experiences. What's going to be 5e's legacy? Critical Role and a bunch of subreddits with made up horror stories because what really happened at the table is so uninteresting they have to make things up for like problem players or whatever. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure some of those horror stories are true, but after all, I made one up, and they still haven't caught which one's fake, and it got a lot of votes because a lot of people will believe your BS just as long as you just kind of make it believable enough, right? That's its legacy. That's what's going to be its legacy. That and a bunch of really cruddy modules. But I've rambled. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, guys, take care. God bless. And I'll see you on the other side.